My son vanished from my life 3 years ago, or so everyone told me. Every month, I drove 2 hours to hand his wife $800 in cash so she could keep my grandson in school and food on the table. Then, one morning, my grandson's teacher called me into the hallway and whispered, "Mr. Callahan, I think you need to look at something. Something about your son doesn't add up." That's when the floor dissolved beneath my feet and took everything I thought was real down with it. I'm glad you're here. Before this story unfolds, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? Drop a comment and tell me your city or state. I read every single one. And one thing before we go any further, some names and details in this story have been adjusted to protect privacy. But the lesson waiting at the end of it, that's as real as the calluses on my hands. Now let me take you back to where it started. The drive from my house in Amarillo to my daughter-in-law Melissa's place in Lubbock was exactly 2 hours and 11 minutes on a good day. I knew every stretch of that highway, the way you know an old scar by feel, without looking. At 64, with a knee that predicted rain better than any weatherman and a back that reminded me every morning why I should have taken that desk job 30 years ago, those 4 hours of round-trip driving felt like a second job. But the first Monday of every month meant one thing. The envelope. $800. 8 crisp hundreds folded twice and tucked inside a plain white envelope I kept in the inside pocket of my jacket. Every dollar came from my pension from 31 years working for the city of Amarillo in water utilities and from the weekend handyman work I still picked up because a man my age with too much quiet in his house either finds something to do or starts talking to the walls. $800 wasn't nothing. Not when your own fixed income barely covered the utilities and the medications your doctor kept adding to the list like he was building a collection. But I made a promise, and Martin Callahan keeps his promises. West Texas in late October carries a cold that sneaks up on you. Clear sky, bright sun, and then a wind comes across the flatlands that cuts straight through whatever you're wearing. I pulled into Melissa's driveway at 10:30 on a Monday morning. The house was a small ranch style on a quiet block beige siding, a brown lawn that hadn't recovered from the summer, a bicycle, my grandson. Cooper had outgrown leaning against the fence because nobody had gotten around to moving it. Cooper was 8, smart kid, had his father's jaw and his late grandmother's eyes gray-green, the color of a sky deciding whether to storm. He'd started 2nd grade that fall, and apparently loved dinosaurs more than he loved anything else on Earth. His teacher had told me that at the open house back in September when I'd shown up because Melissa said she had a work conflict. I'd sat in that little plastic chair meant for a 2nd grader and listened to everything I could about my grandson's days since I barely got to see them anymore. I knocked on Melissa's door. 2 knocks, a pause, one more. Same as always. Footsteps. The lock turned. The door opened maybe 6 inches, stopped by the interior chain. Melissa's face appeared in the gap. She was 34, dark-haired, with eyes that always looked slightly distracted, like part of her mind was always somewhere else running calculations. She'd been like that since Nathan left. Or since we were told Nathan left. Mr. Callahan. Her voice was flat in the way that people make their voice flat when they've practiced staying calm. "Morning, Melissa." I held up the envelope, first of the month. Her hand came through the gap immediately. She took the envelope, thumbed through the bills the way Derek used to quickly, like confirming rather than counting, and pulled her hand back. "Is Cooper home?" I asked. "I've got those dinosaur cards he wanted. Found the whole set at the shop on 6th. He's at school." It was a Monday at 10:30 inches the morning. Of course he was at school. I'd known that before I asked. I just wanted her to have to say something. "I could drop these off to him at lunch," I offered. "His school's only a few minutes from here. I'd love to see him for even..." He doesn't like being interrupted during the school day. She said it the same way someone reads a sentence off a cue card. I'll make sure he gets the cards. "Melissa," I kept my voice even. "I haven't seen Cooper in 6 weeks. We've both been busy." She shifted behind the door. I couldn't see her body, just her face and one shoulder. "I appreciate you coming. I'll tell him you stopped by." The door closed. The chain slid. The deadbolt turned. I stood on that front step in the October wind and stared at the brass numbers screwed into the doorframe. 36 months. 36 envelopes. $800 each. $28,800. And that wasn't counting the extra I'd wired for Cooper's glasses in February, for the busted water heater in April, for the school trip deposit in August. I walked back to my truck and sat there with the engine off. 3 years ago, my son Nathan had called me from Denver, Colorado, where he'd relocated for a project management job with a construction firm. He'd moved there with Melissa and Cooper 2 years before that, when Cooper was just 3 years old. The job had been good money, he'd said, a real opportunity. I'd helped him load the moving truck myself. Then the call came. Nathan had been in an accident, a training facility visit, a roof structure that hadn't been properly cleared, a collapse. He was gone before the paramedics arrived. That's what Melissa told me. That's what the man from the company's HR department told me when he called 2 days later to offer condolences and mention something about life insurance coordination. That's what I believed. Because what kind of father doesn't believe his son is dead when 3 different people tell him so within a week? So I paid. Because Melissa was alone with a 3-year-old in a city she didn't know, and because Nathan would have wanted me to take care of them, and because guilt has a way of making a man reach for his wallet when he can't do anything else useful. Melissa moved back to Lubbock 8 months after the accident. Close to her family, she said. Easier with Cooper. I drove to Lubbock every first Monday. I handed over the envelope. I got a door on a chain and a handful of sentences. I put the truck in reverse and backed out of her driveway. I was almost to the highway when I thought about the bicycle leaning against the fence. Cooper had outgrown it, yes, but there'd been a second bike tire track in the mud near the gate, wider, adult-sized. I kept driving, but I kept thinking. The call came on a Thursday. I was in the middle of replacing a garbage disposal for a couple over on Western Street when my phone buzzed. Unknown number with a Lubbock area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. Something made me step into the kitchen and answer it. Is this Martin Callahan? Cooper Callahan's grandfather? It is. Mr. Callahan, this is Donna Pierce. I'm Cooper's teacher at Ridgeview Elementary. A pause. I hope I'm not overstepping. I got your number from the emergency contact form that Melissa filed at the start of the year. You're listed as a secondary contact. Of course. Is Cooper okay? Cooper is fine. He's wonderful, actually. He's that sort of why I'm calling. Another pause, longer this time. I could hear classroom noise in the background, the hum of children between periods. Mr. Callahan, could you come to the school sometime this week? There's something I'd like to show you in person. I'd rather not discuss it over the phone. There was something in her voice I recognized. I'd heard it in my ex-wife's voice the night she told me my father had been lying about his diagnosis. Carefully controlled. Trying to deliver weight without dropping it all at once. I can be there tomorrow morning, I said. I finished the disposal. I didn't sleep much that night. Donna Pierce was in her early 40s. She had the kind of steady, patient energy that good elementary school teachers develop after years of managing rooms full of 7-year-olds. She met me at the front office and walked me to her classroom, which smelled like crayons and hand sanitizer. She closed the door. Thank you for coming so quickly, she said. I want to be honest with you. I debated whether to make this call, but I kept coming back to Cooper, and I kept coming back to you showing up to that open house alone, and I decided that doing nothing was worse than possibly being wrong. Tell me, I said. She sat down across from me at the small table near her desk. Cooper has been having some hard weeks, she began. Nothing behavioral. He's still one of my best students. But he's been saying things that worried me. A few weeks ago, during journaling time, he wrote that he missed his dad, and that he wished his dad didn't have to pretend to be gone. She watched my face. I asked him what he meant. He got very quiet and said he wasn't supposed to talk about it. The air in the room changed. He's 8, she continued. Children that age sometimes blend fantasy and reality. I know that. I wasn't ready to read too much into it. But then, last week, one of the other students brought in a photo from a birthday party they'd both attended over the weekend, a neighborhood thing. And in the background of the photo, she reached into her desk and slid a printed photograph across the table. Cooper pointed to a man standing near the back fence and said, "That's my daddy," and then immediately went pale and said he wasn't supposed to say that. I looked at the photograph. The man near the fence was turned partly to the side. Dark hair, a little longer than I remembered, heavier in the jaw, like he'd gained some weight. But the way he stood, That particular slouch in the left shoulder that Nathan had carried since a high school football injury. You don't forget the way your son holds his body. I stopped breathing. I don't know what's happening in that family, Donna said carefully, and it's not my place to assume. But that little boy is confused and scared and keeping a secret that's too heavy for him. And you're his grandfather, and you were driving 2 hours every month to check on him, and I thought you deserved to know what he said. I set the photograph down on the table. Can I keep this? I asked. My voice came out steadier than I felt. I made it for you, she said. I thanked her. I walked to my truck. I sat in the parking lot of Ridgeview Elementary for a long time. Then I called my younger brother, Gene. Gene was 61, retired from the Army after 22 years, and had spent the decade since doing private security consulting. If I needed someone methodical, someone who didn't panic and didn't theorize before he had facts, it was Gene. I told him everything. The payments, the chained door, the adult bicycle track, Donna Pierce, the photograph. Gene listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "Send me the photo. Don't go back to that house. And don't contact Melissa. Give me 48 hours. I gave him 48 hours. He arrived at my house in Amarillo on Saturday with a box of files and a laptop, and the same expression he always had when he was working. Not grim, just very, very focused. First thing, he said, setting up at my kitchen table. The accident. He'd spent 2 days pulling threads. What he laid out in front of me over the next 4 hours was methodical and devastating. Nathan's supposed accident had occurred at a job site in the Denver metro area, at a facility being renovated by a company called Centennial Ridge Development. Gene had found no OSHA incident report filed under Nathan's name, or any name, for that location during the relevant month. There was no death certificate for Nathan Aaron Callahan filed in the state of Colorado for that year. Gene had checked the Colorado Vital Records verification system, the same kind of search Patty had done with Oregon in our reference story. Only Gene had done it faster because he knew exactly where to look. The death certificate Melissa gave you, Gene said, sliding a printout toward me. Look at the county identifier in the certificate number. I looked. It meant nothing to me. That prefix code is for Larimer County, Gene said. The accident supposedly happened in Jefferson County. That's not a clerical error. Those numbers are assigned at the point of filing. Whoever made this didn't know that. Forged. There's more, Gene said. He pulled up a second document. I ran Nathan's social security number through a benefits activity trace. I still have access to certain databases from my consulting work. His number shows active employment contributions, meaning payroll taxes are being filed against his SSN. He has a current employer. My son had a current employer. I couldn't speak. Gene let me sit with it. He poured us both a cup of coffee and waited. Where? I finally said. The employer of record is a company called Ridgeline Project Solutions, LLC, registered in New Mexico. But here's where it gets specific. He turned the laptop toward me. Ridgeline's listed business address is a mailbox storefront in Albuquerque. The actual work activity, based on the linked contractor filings, is in the Lubbock area. Lubbock. Nathan is in Lubbock, I said. That's what the data says, Gene replied. Has been for at least 18 months. I looked at my brother across my kitchen table. The photograph from the birthday party was sitting between us. Cooper knew, I said. That's what he meant, pretending to be gone. He's been seeing his father, probably in that house. Probably the whole time. Gene nodded slowly. And the $800 a month you've been sending is paying for all of it, I finished. All 3 of them. Gene folded his hands. Martin, there's something else. He pulled up one more file. Through the property records database, he'd found that Melissa's Lubbock house, the one I'd been pulling up to every month, had been purchased 18 months ago. Not by Melissa, by an LLC. The managing member of that LLC was listed as a Nathan A. Callahan. My dead son had bought the house. And then Gene showed me the airline records. He'd gotten them through a contact at a travel agency he'd worked with during his consulting years. Not the whole manifest, just a booking confirmation retrieved through a rewards account linked to Nathan's email address. An address Gene had found through a data broker search. 3 seats on a flight. One way. From Lubbock Preston Smith International to Cancun, Mexico. Departing November 8th. passengers, Nathan A. Callahan, Melissa R. Callahan. A third adult name I didn't recognize. No child's booking, no seat for Cooper. My grandson was 8 years old, and they were leaving him behind. I pressed my hands flat on the table to keep them from shaking. "When did you find this?" I asked. "This morning," Jean said, "which is why I drove here instead of calling. We have 11 days, Martin." I closed my eyes. I thought about my son at 8 years old, the same age Cooper is now, sitting on my shoulders at a county fair in the summer, laughing at something I'd said. I thought about all the conversations we'd had about what it meant to be a father, about responsibility, about showing up. I thought about driving that highway every month in the wind and handing over that envelope to a door on a chain. I opened my eyes. "Who do we call?" I asked. "I know a detective in the Lubbock PD," Jean said. "She handles financial crimes. Worked with her on a case 4 years ago. Straight shooter." "Call her," I said. "Detective Sandra Voss met us at a diner off the Loop Road in Lubbock on Sunday afternoon. She was in her late 40s, compact, with short, silver-streaked hair, and the particular manner of someone who had spent enough years hearing unbelievable things that very little surprised her anymore. She ordered black coffee and listened to Jean walk through the entire case. She asked 2 questions during the whole presentation. First, is the child currently in any danger? Jean said he had no reason to believe Cooper was in physical danger, only that he was being used to maintain the appearance of a normal household. Second question, how much money total? I told her. 36 months at $800. The extras for the glasses and the water heater and the school trip, just over $31,000. She nodded once and pulled the documents toward her. She reviewed them the way someone reads a map before a long trip carefully, marking things mentally. "Give me 3 days," she said. "I want to verify the employment records and confirm the flight booking through our own channels before we move. If what you've given me checks out, and I believe it does, we'll have enough for warrants." 3 days felt like 3 years. I drove back to Amarillo. I sat in my house and looked at photographs of Nathan from every age I could remember him. His first day of Little League, his high school graduation, his wedding day, his face at the hospital the morning Cooper was born, that expression fathers get when they're holding their child for the first time and realizing nothing will ever be small or safe or simple again. I didn't understand how someone gets from that moment to a forged death certificate and a one-way ticket. I didn't understand it. But I thought about Cooper saying he wasn't supposed to talk about it, and I stopped trying to understand his father and started thinking about my grandson. Jean called on Wednesday evening. "Detective Voss confirmed everything," he said. "Nathan's been working for a civil engineering firm outside Lubbock under a modified version of his name, using his middle name as his first. She found him. She also found the third person on that flight, a woman named Cassandra Tillow. She and Nathan have an apartment lease together in a part of Lubbock across town from Melissa's house." "He wasn't even living with Melissa," I said slowly. "No. Melissa and Nathan have been running the scheme together, keeping the story consistent, sharing the money, presenting a united front whenever needed. But he's been with this other woman for at least 2 years. They're all 3 taking the flight together." I sat down. "Martin," Jean said, "Cooper is not on that lease, not on the apartment, not on the flight. There's no custody filing, no guardianship designation, nothing. If they leave on the 8th, that child has nobody with legal authority to care for him. They were just going to leave him," I said. "It wasn't a question. Best we can tell," Jean said. "The plan was probably to leave him with Melissa's mother. No formal arrangement. Just drop him off and disappear." "He's 8 years old," I said. "I know. He thinks his father is dead." "I know, Martin." I pressed my phone against my chest for a moment and looked at the ceiling of my living room. "There's a water stain up there I've been meaning to fix for 2 years. Connie, my wife, Nathan's mother, she used to say that water stain looked like a rabbit. She'd named it Gerald. She passed 4 years ago from a stroke, quick and without warning, and I still can't look at that ceiling without talking to her in my head. I talked to her then. I told her what Nathan had done. I told her about Cooper. I told her I was going to fix it. On November 7th, the day before the scheduled flight, Jean and I sat in Detective Voss's department sedan parked on a side street near Melissa's house. 2 patrol units were staged half a block in either direction. It was 6:15 in the morning. the sky still dark at the edges but going gray in the east. At 6:48, a silver pickup truck pulled to the curb in front of the house. The driver's door opened. My son stepped out. I hadn't seen him in 3 years. He looked older. Not dramatically, not in a bad way older, just settled, in the way of someone who has been comfortable. He was wearing a fleece jacket and carrying a coffee cup. He walked to the front door of Melissa's house, like a man who had done it 1,000 times, because he had. He knocked twice. The door opened immediately. Voss picked up her radio. All units. Subjects are together inside. We move in 8 minutes. Those 8 minutes. I have lived a lot of difficult minutes in my life. I sat in a waiting room for 6 hours when Cooper was born premature at 34 weeks, and we didn't know if he'd be okay. I stood at Connie's graveside in February wind and tried to remember how to breathe. None of those minutes moved like these 8 did. I thought about Nathan, at Cooper's age, asking me why the sky was blue and actually listening to my answer like it was the most important information he'd ever received. I thought about Cooper telling his teacher that his daddy had to pretend to be gone. The radio crackled. "Move," Voss said. The patrol units pulled forward without lights. Officers approached the front door. Voss got out of the car. Jean and I followed. Voss knocked. "Lubbock PD, open the door." Scrambling inside. A raised voice. Something knocked over. The door opened. Nathan stood there in sweatpants and his fleece jacket. His face went completely white when he saw me. "Dad!" Just that. One word, like the air had gone out of him. "Nathan." I kept my voice level. It took everything I had. Voss stepped forward. "Nathan Callahan, you are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and identity-related financial crimes." She recited his rights. Nathan didn't fight. He didn't run. He just looked at me the entire time Voss was speaking. And whatever he was looking for in my face, I don't know that he found it. Melissa came from the kitchen. She saw the officers and stopped. Her jaw set hard, but her eyes went immediately to the stairs. I knew what she was thinking. Same thing I was. Cooper. I heard his footsteps before I saw him, little bare feet on the wooden stairs. He appeared at the landing in his pajamas, the ones with the cartoon velociraptors on them that I'd sent for his birthday, rubbing his eyes against the light. "Grandpa?" His voice was the smallest thing I'd ever heard. "Hey, buddy. I went to the bottom of the stairs. Hey, come here." He came down the stairs and walked into my arms. I picked him up. He was heavier than the last time I'd held him. Kids get heavier so fast, and he put his chin on my shoulder and held on with both arms. "Why are there police?" he whispered. "Some grown-up problems got figured out," I said. "But you're okay. I've got you." He pulled back and looked at me. Then he looked past me at his father in handcuffs, and his face did something complicated and quiet that no 8-year-old should have a reason to do. "Daddy?" Nathan closed his eyes. "It's going to be okay, Coop," he said. His voice broke on the last word. The officers led him toward the door. He looked back at Cooper once. I don't know what he saw. I was looking at my grandson. The next hours were procedural. Melissa was arrested alongside Nathan. Cassandra Tillow, reached by officers at the apartment across town, was detained for questioning. Jean stayed with me and Cooper in the kitchen while Voss coordinated everything, and Cooper ate a bowl of cereal and asked me 14 questions about dinosaurs, because that's what 8-year-olds do when they don't have the vocabulary yet for what they're actually feeling. I answered all 14 questions as thoroughly as I could. 4 months later, I sat in a Lubbock County courtroom with Cooper beside me, his small hand in mine, Jean on my other side. Nathan received 7 years for fraud, conspiracy, and false declaration of death for financial gain. His attorney had argued for a reduced sentence. The judge was not persuaded. Nathan looked at me when the verdict was read. I looked back. I didn't look away. Melissa received 5 years for conspiracy and fraud. She wept when the sentence was handed down. Cooper stared at the table in front of us. Cassandra Tillow received 2 years for her role in the financial scheme, along with a restitution order. Together they were ordered to repay every dollar I had given them. The house Nathan had purchased under the LLC, my money had largely funded. The down payment was seized and liquidated. Combined with the other seized assets, it covered the majority of the restitution. I was granted full legal guardianship of Cooper. In the courthouse hallway afterward, a bailiff allowed Nathan a brief word with me while Jean took Cooper to find a vending machine. Dad. Nathan's hands were cuffed in front of him. He looked like he hadn't slept well in 4 months, which I imagine he hadn't. There isn't anything I can say. No, I agreed. There isn't, I thought. He stopped, started again. I convinced myself it wasn't really hurting you, that you could afford it, that it was going to a good cause. Your son, I said, believed you were dead. For 3 years, your son has been carrying that, and you were 20 minutes away. Nathan looked at the floor. Your mother, I said, and I made myself finish it. She never knew about any of this, but she went to her grave worrying about you, about whether you were happy, about whether she'd done enough. She talked about you at the end like she was still trying to solve some puzzle she couldn't quite get. And you were fine. You were right here, and you were fine. He didn't say anything. I'll forgive you, I told him. Not today. Maybe not for a long time. But I will, because Cooper is going to need a father someday, and I won't be the one who poisons that for him. When you get out, if you come back to us honestly, we'll figure out what that looks like. But that decision belongs to Cooper, not to me, not to you. To him. Nathan nodded. His jaw was tight in the way it used to get when he was trying not to cry as a teenager because he thought men weren't supposed to. I turned and walked back toward Jean and my grandson. The restitution check arrived 10 weeks after sentencing. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time before I opened the envelope, $31,400. I got out a notepad and started writing. Cooper's college fund. $20,000, locked until he was 18. His choice when he got there, university, trade school, community college, whatever fit who he turned out to be. Ridgeview Elementary, anonymous donation. $3,000 to the classroom supply fund. Donna Pierce would never know where it came from, but she'd have what she needed. She'd given me something I couldn't repay. This was a start. Emergency savings for Cooper's care. $5,000. Because things happen, and a man raising a grandson at 64 needs a cushion. New truck tires, long overdue. $800. Connie used to say I'd drive on the rims before I'd admit I needed new ones. Remaining balance toward the small garage workshop I'd been building up piece by piece, a proper space where Cooper and I could work on things together. He'd taken to woodworking the way some kids take to video games. I'd taught him to sand with the grain 3 weekends ago, and the look on his face when he ran his palm over the smoothed wood was something I intend to carry with me for the rest of my days. 2 months after the sentencing, on a Saturday morning in February, Cooper and I drove to the cemetery in Amarillo where Connie is buried. He'd asked to go. I hadn't suggested it. He carried the flowers himself, yellow ones, because he'd overheard me tell Jean once that yellow was her favorite. We stood at the headstone together, the flat plains wind doing what plains wind does. Grandma Connie, Cooper said, with the particular solemnity of a child who has decided to take something seriously. I'm going to take care of Grandpa, so you don't have to worry. My throat closed entirely. I managed to say, she'd be real glad to hear that, Coop. He set the flowers against the stone and stood there a moment. Then he looked up at me. Do you think she knew? About Dad? No, I said. She didn't know. Is that better or worse? I thought about it. I took the question seriously the way he deserved. Better, I said finally. She got to love him without knowing. That's a kind of mercy. Cooper considered this. Then he nodded, like he'd filed it away somewhere, and took my hand. We walked back to the truck together. He talked about the birdhouse he wanted to build next. Something more complicated than the last one, with a real hinged roof so we could clean it out between seasons. I told him we could absolutely do that, and that I had a book at home with 12 different plans and he could pick whichever one he wanted. He picked 3, because he's his grandmother's grandson. That evening we sat on the back step of my house in Amarillo as the sun went down behind the flat horizon in that wide West Texas way, colors spread out like something poured across the whole sky. Cooper was eating the last of the apple slices I'd cut up for him, and he was quiet in the way children get quiet when they're processing something real. Grandpa, he said, are we going to be okay? I looked at this boy, 8 years old and already acquainted with more loss and confusion than most people deal with at 40. sharp and curious and still, somehow, fundamentally hopeful in the way children are before the world fully convinces them not to be. We're going to build our own kind of okay, I told him. You and me. He leaned against my arm. I like that. I put my arm around him. I had lost my son in more ways than I had the words for. I had lost 3 years and more than $30,000 to a lie that was built in the exact shape of my love for him. I had lost the chance to grieve properly, or not grieve, or feel whatever a father is supposed to feel when the truth is too strange and too painful to file neatly into any single category. But I had this boy, and he had me. And that evening, sitting on the back step with the West Texas sky doing everything it could above us, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. There are things I know now that I wish I'd known earlier. I trusted completely because I loved completely, and I let those two things blur into the same thing. They aren't the same thing. Trust is something you extend and verify. Love is something different. You can love someone and still ask to see the paperwork. You can love someone and still notice when the door is always on a chain. If something feels wrong, let it feel wrong. Don't argue yourself out of it because the alternative is too hard to look at. Ask the questions. Donna Pierce asked the questions. Jean asked the questions. And because they did, Cooper is sleeping 20 feet from where I'm sitting. In a room with a proper bookshelf now and paint, he chose himself a deep, particular blue. He called serious blue because he wanted a serious room where serious thinking could happen. He's 8 years old. He's going to be okay. And if this story found you at a moment when you needed to hear that the truth is worth chasing, even when it's terrifying, I'm glad it did. Leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. And take care of the people who can't take care of themselves. That's the whole thing. That's all of it. That's what I've got.